Hi, and welcome back to my channel. In this tutorial, we're diving deep into a crucial aspect of pattern assembly. We'll be annotating, labeling, and sewing a three-part corset cup pattern. Now, proper annotation, labeling, and grain line placement, and so many other details can be pretty much of a challenge for so many designers. But guess what? I'm here and I'm super excited to make sure you get it just right. We'll be covering everything you need to know, from annotating and labeling each piece accurately to expertly joining the three parts together. So grab your pattern pieces, your favorite fabric, and let's dive in. Don't forget, if you have any questions along the way, feel free to drop them in the comments section. I start by notching accurately, matching points as identified from the drafting process. Next, I place grain lines, which indicates the direction of the fabric warp threads. I'll explain this in details in the next step. I place grain lines on all three pattern pieces. Next, I label the various pattern pieces, starting with the front cup as FC, the side cup as SC, and then the upper cup as UC. I cross-check to see that my notches are properly and accurately placed. I go ahead and label the grain lines. I repeat this for all three pattern pieces. GL, grain lines, GL. Very importantly also is to label the various corners. So if this is 2, this will automatically be 2. This will also be 2. This would be 3 and a matching 3. Now, assuming this is 1, this end will also be 1. If this is 4, this end will also be 4. And then here we'll have 5 and 6. With this, you can see that annotations provide crucial information about each pattern piece. This includes not just the name of the piece, but also key details like notches, grain lines, darts, and any other essential marking. Now let's move on to the pattern assembly and more detailed explanation on the various annotations. Now let's take a close look at the grain line placement on the three-part cup. Why do you think grain lines are placed this way? They are horizontally placed on the upper cup, while on the lower cup part, they are placed vertically. I rephrase again. Why does grain line placement on the lower cup are placed vertically, while on the upper cup they are horizontally placed, like so? What do you think is the reason for the difference in this grain line placement? Secondly, why do we label the cup patterns this way? We shall explain that right after we are done with the grain line placement. I would like to go deep into the grain line placement for now. So, assuming you have a fabric, this is the selvage, okay? The part labeled with write-ups is called the selvage, okay? Now, all the grain lines that runs parallel to this selvage are referred to as the lengthwise grains, while those that run perpendicular to the selvage are referred to as the crosswise grain. Let me quickly give you a quick illustration on paper. I rule a horizontal straight line, then a perpendicular to the straight line, and another 2 at 45 degrees to the horizontal line like so. I rule out these markings to show the 45-degree lines. Now the edge of the paper becomes our selvage. Okay, assuming the edge of the paper is the selvage. Now the horizontal line is the lengthwise grain. I label it as lengthwise grain, while the perpendicular line is referred to as the crosswise grain. Now those happening at 45 degrees to the horizontal line are referred to as the bias grain. Okay, I repeat for clarity. This is the selvage, this is the lengthwise grain, this is the bias grain, and this is the crosswise grain happening perpendicular to the selvage. Okay, if you fold like this, you're folding on the bias grain. If you fold this way, you're folding along the crosswise grain. And when you fold this way, you're folding along the lengthwise grain, which is parallel to the selvage. Okay? Now the lengthwise grain is tough. It does not stretch easily. And these properties are more evident on fabrics like the jersey, tulle, lycra, and others, where you see a whole lot of stretch difference. Okay, the crosswise grain, on the other hand, is more elastic. It has more elastic properties. If tried on this Ankara, that is not exactly a stretchy fabric, you could even see that the grain is more stretchy when compared to the lengthwise grain. So now let's return back to our pattern. What's the significance of placing the grain line in the direction in which they are placed? Having understood the grains on fabric, let's fold our Ankara fabric like so, such that the fold happens along the lengthwise grain and parallel to the selvage. Okay, I fold my fabric on the lengthwise grain, happening along the selvage, as in parallel to the selvage. Now remember, I told us that grain line on patterns indicates the direction of the fabric warp threads. In other words, when placing grain lines on patterns, ensure it's parallel to the selvage. Okay, now remember from our elementary definition of parallel lines never get to meet. So in that manner, all grain lines on the patterns must be placed in a way that runs parallel to the selvage, like so. So you can see all the grain lines on the patterns are now parallel to the selvage. So this brings us again to the major question. Why this arrangement? Firstly, note that the grain lines are all happening along the direction of the stitch line. This ensures that you are aligning the fabric with the direction of greatest stress in order to avoid distortion. On the lower cups, they are vertically placed because that's the direction of the stitch line as well, like so. Okay? Additionally, it also offers support and stability. Now, the upper cup of a bra provides crucial support to the bust. This ensures that the fabric maintains its structure and provides the necessary support. It maintains its shape and prevents it from stretching excessively, which could lead to sagging or loss of support over time. So it's ideal is placed like this because of the unique properties of the lengthwise grain. So after cutting, I will tell you more about the labeling of the various corners and points using the various numbers. So let's go on to the cutting and labeling of fabric patterns. So I put my pattern aside. Okay, this is my fabric. This is the selvage. I marked the wrong side with chalk. Now this is the right face facing up. Okay, I go ahead and fold the fabric in two along the lengthwise grain, like so, with the wrong face facing out. Observe that when I fold, I try to align the patterns on the fabric to be duplicated on each pattern piece for uniformity and beauty in the overall look of the project. So you can see me rearranging and folding the patterns. I place my pattern as discussed in previous step with all grain lines running parallel to the selvage. I take my time to align my patterns around the most appealing design on the fabric. The most important thing is I ensured every design on any piece of pattern will also be duplicated on the second piece as well. So you can see on the lower cup area, it's also a duplicate, just like you have on the upper cup. Okay, so I fold this way and then arrange my pattern very nicely. I estimate the quantity of fabric needed for this project. I will go right ahead and cut out the desired portion before applying my fusible interface. I put aside the remaining fabric so I can concentrate on the desired portion of fabric. I trim and neaten all raw edges like so. Just be careful not to trim beyond the portion required. So I trim all around, and then using my fusible interface, in Nigeria we refer to it as nylon hair stay. It's quite affordable compared to the cotton version of it, hence the popularity. Ensure the rough part faces up and spread your fabric with wrong face against the rough part. This is the part that carries the gum. Now, having arranged my fabric, I press using a hot steam iron and allow it to stick. Now, while ironing, I avoid the edges in order to avoid the gum. I put aside the iron and then I trim out the unfused nylon stay to allow me iron more intensely. So I take my time to trim out the unfused nylon stay like so that I can iron more intensely without the gum sticking to the iron. I continue trimming. Okay, take your time to trim properly. When I'm done doing this, I fold back the original way and then iron some more. Iron some more. Make sure you arrange the fabric back to the original form. Arrange the fabric and then press some more. Make sure it's properly stuck before you arrange your patterns. Now I arrange my patterns as earlier discussed, with the grain lines running parallel to the selvage. Okay. Now, because I'm using an oak tag board or heavy duty pattern paper, I will not be able to pin, but rather trace the outline of the patterns onto the fabric like so, using a pen. You also notice I attached the fusible interface before cutting and not cutting before fusing. This is to prevent any distortion or change in patterns, as some fabrics may shrink when subjected to heat. So this helps to avoid this occurrence. Ensure you mark all the notches. Very important. Mark all the notches. And then pin the pattern before you start cutting, like so. Pin all the pieces, then cut out the various patterns. Be careful not to cut the wrong part. Cut out the various patterns, trim out all unwanted parts, like so. Trim the upper cup as well. Now I start annotating by snipping through the notched mark transferred. I copy Okay, see the notches? See these notches? Very important. Now I copy all marks and numbering on paper pattern to the fabric pattern, like so. I cross-check to ensure that the alignment is okay. This number 4, number 4, 3, 3, 5, and 6. Having done this, I turn over to the opposite side and copy the same to the other side. Now the importance of these marks cannot be overemphasized, as every little extra time spent here can save a lot of frustration later. Also ensure you do all of this while the pins are still in place to avoid it getting mixed up. If you feel only numbering will not suffice, you can go ahead and copy the pattern names FC, SC, UC, as the case may be. But if you trust your numbering is okay, you can skip this part. Now let's move on to the sewing of the cup pieces. You will agree with me that the ultimate importance of accurate annotation and labeling is basically to set the foundation for a successful sewing project. We start by removing the pins to free the pieces. Next, I pick one piece each from the lower cup set and align the notches on each piece together and pin, like so. Now I do the same for the second set of the lower cup parts. Now aside the notch, you can see that number 2 aligns with number 2 on both pieces and number 3 aligns with number 3. I go ahead and sew using 1/2 inch sewing allowance. After which, I take off the pin and observe my stitches and curve like so. If it's smooth enough, I go ahead and do the same for the other pair. Okay, so I'm satisfied. I go ahead and do the same for the second pair. I stitch out 1/2 inch, trim, and then observe some more. I turn both patterns with the front cup facing each other. Then I turn over again with front cup still facing each other. I separate the upper cup pair and place them in such a way that the numbering on it aligns with the numbering on the lower cup parts. Now I place 2 against 2, number 2 against number 2 on both pieces. I trim off the excess allowance to reduce bulk, open the seam allowance, and then pin. Remember, I'm doing this at point 2. Now I drop this and then pick the second one and do the same. Pin. And then from point 1, I start sewing while using my left hand to align the pattern as it ought to be. Remove the pin to free up the pattern at some point. Continue sewing. Now after sewing, you will observe that all the pattern pieces fit perfectly well. You can see the edges. And this further confirms that your pattern and sewing allowance addition was perfectly done. Now I turn to the right face and observe closely the shape of the cup before going ahead to join the second cup. I'm satisfied with this. So I pick the second cup and then I go ahead and quickly join the second piece as well. After sewing, I observe again, and I think I'm quite satisfied with the outcome. With this, I'm ready to move on to the next step, which is the ironing and molding, as well as finishing the cup. You will observe that the shape has already been formed even without ironing or pressing. Now I turn to the inner part in preparation for pressing. I do the same for the second cup. And for the purpose of pressing, I'll be making use of this cup pressing mold or this one. I created this from a carpenter, but you can get the ready-made from Rookie Lawa store on IG. Now, I use this more often than this. This is because when using this, it's always kind of difficult to go very low with pressing iron, except it's placed on a base like so. Because without this base, it can really be difficult to comfortably go low with iron, except with the aid of a pillow like so. This is only when going low with iron. Okay, now I open up the seam allowance and then give it a nice press. So I'll go ahead and press one cup with this cup pressing mode, and then I'll use the second cup pressing mode to press the second cup. Now I continuously use my second hand to position and keep the mold in place while ironing. When all seam allowances have been opened up, I turn the right side out and gently place it back on the cup pressing mold like so, and then give it a nice press again, just to smoothen the outer face. When you are sure that all seams are properly smoothened and opened up, I put it aside. So you see how beautiful it turned out. It's so lovely. Now I put this cup pressing mode aside, and then I use the second one to do the same to the second cup. I follow the same procedure like the first. Now you observe that this standalone mold is much more easier to use compared to the first one. Now also observe that the first cup pressing mold is bigger than this second one. So when I have a big cup, I use the first cup pressing mold and then the later for smaller cups. So I gently press open all the seams and then I turn over. I turn over like I did in the first procedure. I iron very nicely. Now that I'm done with pressing, looking at these cups right now reminds me of what I was telling you earlier about duplicating patterns. Now, when you look at this cup closely, you will appreciate the importance and emphasis on aligning patterns before cutting. Both cups are a mirror image of one another, from lower cups to the upper cup. When you observe very closely, all the patterns are a mirror image of one another. Now, I do not like the cup just being plain. I'll go ahead and use a bias to further enhance the beauty of the cup. Okay, now I choose black because it's matching. Okay, the fabric is green, so I choose black. Let me go ahead and enhance the beauty. I start by sewing on the bias tape to the seam line on the lower cup first, before the central seam line, connecting the upper cup to the lower cup. I start with the lower one. Now place the bias in such a way that the seam line falls in the middle of the bias tip. Now I stitch on the other end of the bias like so. Now when I'm done with the lower cup, I trim out the threads and then also the excess bias like so, and then I go right on and sew on the central seam. I sew the bias on the central seam as well. Be careful to place the bias as described earlier. Place the bias in such a way that the seam line happens in the middle of the bias, so that it still maintains the shape and alignment like so. Take your time and do it very nicely. Now stitch the other end of the bias. And when you're done doing this, you cut out the extra bias tip, trim out the threads hanging all over, and then do the same for the second cup as well. Start by attaching the bias just exactly the same way you did the first one. Trim out the threads like so. Then attach the bias on the central seam as well. Now sew down the other side of the bias as well. Then trim out the excess bias. You observe that the seams are central. Okay, the bias are placed centrally. Now when I'm done, I take it to the ironing board. I give it a very good press. Okay, like so. It will be great hearing from you which of the cup you actually prefer. The one enhanced with bias tape or the one without a bias tape. Let me know in the comment section below. With this, we have come to the end of this tutorial, annotating, cutting and sewing of a 3-part cup. I hope you found it valuable and inspiring. If this video has made an impact on you, please show your support by liking, sharing, and leaving a comment down below. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on your notification bell so you'll be the first to know when our next video drops. Until I come your way again, keep creating and stay inspired as always. I love you. Bye.